Order. Made in time. Evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Evening.
Welcome to the meeting. We'll get straight on with the agenda or no.
Read the opening
No.
statement for me, just the first page.
Be that quick. Right. Chair's opening remarks. In accordance with openness of open local of in accordance with openness of local bodies regulation, this meeting is being live streamed and may otherwise be recorded, filmed, or communicated on media platforms. Recording of this meeting is going to be available on the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Both councillors and officers are reminded to make full use of speak clearly into microphones provided. A reminder that all mobile phones should be turned off or put on silence. Those present at the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls.
You don't need to do the back, Steve.
So, we'll see how short the meeting was to be. First item on the agenda. Apologies should be. Because
Apologies have been received from councillors Linda Bradley, Frank Bradley, Liz Darling, and Linda Eaton.
okay, number 3, appointment of substitutes. There aren't any.
None have been received.
Declaration of interest. Minutes of previous meeting.
Moved.
Moved, seconded. All those in favour? All against? Actually, was there actually minute from the last meeting? No. Petitions or deputations?
None have been received.
There's a done. Okay. Licensing regulatory update. Mr. Wells?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry. Right, well, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I owe an apology and thanks to Councillor Carter for pointing out that some of the data I'd included on the original presentation was in fact a reproduction of the one before. So I do apologise for that, an oversight on my part. So what I've done is reissued the presentation, and thanks to Adam and the Democratic Services team for sending that through this morning. So in terms of food, it's all looking pretty good at the moment. As you know, we recruited to that vacancy we were really desperate to get in the end of November. I'm pleased to report that actually compliance is around a 90% mark, which is pretty good. But that does include the 31 premises that are waiting inspection. So actually, once we've assessed those, that compliance rate may go up or down. Because we've got that extra capacity, we're going to commence sampling from April 23. So that's routine sampling. So when we do an inspection, we sample products, meats, etc., and we take them away for analysis to check content and stuff like that. So we're working with the County Council, trading standards with that. During Q3, all the high risk premises that we'd set out to inspect have all been completed. We now have what we call Bs and Cs to carry out in the last quarter, and 77 other lower risk inspections. So these are premises that are visited once a year, once every 18 months, once every 2 years. So those are the higher risk, like butchers, takeaways and the like we've done. So we've just got those left to do now. And we still notice a drop off in some standards, as probably as you know as well, a lot of re-inspection is being asked for. So obviously a lot of premises get a low score. I'm not particularly happy with that. So the next page is the correct up-to-date food scores. Hopefully you can see that. I know it's realise I might put it further on there. So what I've tried to do from that is produce on the next slide, make it really easy to see the actual poor performers currently that we've got. And clearly a 3 and above is satisfactory, going up to good. Anything below that, we then target for intervention. I think there were some questions asked before around what were the issues, why the schools so lowly, so I try to give you a little bit of context there in general terms. So you're probably aware the scoring's made up of their practices, so what they actually do, how they're trained and the paperwork, but also the structure of the process as well as it's suitable for its purpose. So as you can see there, I don't intend to go through them, but you can have a quick read through those now. These are some of the issues we're picking up. Paperwork is particularly poor, and I think sometimes that might be a language barrier, so we're trying to address that by translating different documents for people Eastern European and particularly for the Chinese communities. More we're in is the care home standards seem to be slipping as well, so we have sort of focused around those. And the wheel in, we have a big challenge at the moment because the premises are currently closed. And we've had to serve notice on them because a significant amount of waste is accumulated at the rear. We've took action in default, which means we've took action against them because they haven't responded back to that notice. And now we're looking at further action because there's a rodent infestation around that premise as well, which is particularly disappointing.
Hello.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just for information, looking at the ones you've got there, how does what we do here tie in with the Care Quality Commission for the homes? Do we have any input into what happens with those? Because I know there's been an incident recently in paper highlighted with both of the homes that we've got listed there. So do we interact with them and give them information?
You want to take
Sure. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Chatsworth as well?
Oh, right.
Let him answer the first.
It's different, okay.
So yes, clearly we did food and food practices and food management. They look at health and safety and the space standards, heating, lighting and so forth. But we share information. We have an agreement with them where we can share information because it helps for them evaluate and also for ourselves knowing if managers have changed, if practices have changed and things like that, which contribute to the outcome from our visit as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, having once been a food trader and a sole trader, I found the process quite easy to get the food standard to 5. And I would have thought that I was the difficult end of the spectrum in terms of achieving that because it's all on me. I would have thought care homes and larger establishments shouldn't have a problem getting a relatively easy score of 4 or 5. And they've got a bigger commitment than I have. You know, they should all know their allergens and the way you keep food. And it's disappointing that they don't come up to it. But, you know, we name and shame. But I think we're doing a lot better now as an inspection regime we were previously. I know the pandemic completely threw us out. But I think we're on the right track now, so keep on.
Thank you.
Lily Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. During the pandemic, there was like a cottage industry that was set up where people were actually cooking from homes and providing, you know, their customers with food from homes. I don't know whether there are many still left doing this, but if they are, how are they vetted? How do you get to know about them? And then obviously once you get to know about them, I guess you go and inspect them. But how do you actually get to know about them?
We do, sorry, Chair, can I answer that? Yeah.
Sure.
We do rely a lot on intelligence and information sharing. So whether that comes through a neighbour, for example, because we see a lot more activity around the house, whether it comes from a supplier they're provided with stuff from. We had over 90 in one particular quarter during lockdown where there were home caterers. So what we do when we do get, because it's an offence to actually run a business, a food business, without registering with the local authority. So we've got that stick, if you like, but only if, as you quite rightly say, if you get to know about them. And then we do a bit of a triage, so we do a risk assessment over the phone. It's more cost effective, it's quicker, and we can also see the sort of likelihood of it being a problem or not in terms of throughput, who they're supplying, etc. So we do rely a lot on information sharing for that.
Jeffrey Kaufman.
I may have, and I misheard this or not heard this. Number 6, Sycamore Cottage. What does it mean, two structure of the kitchen? Have they actually achieved any improvement? You might have explained that, I never heard it.
No, thank you, Councillor. I mean, basically they've scored a 2. That's what it means, a 2.
They've scored a 2.
And the reason for them scoring a 2 is the structure of the kitchen. So there's some faults with the structure of the kitchen. So that might be tiles falling off. It might be basically metal surfaces that have been scratched and dirty and not kept clean. Usually it's linked in, but actually they need to make some more physical improvements than a lot. So that's as much as I can tell you. I didn't inspect it, so I don't know the actual true reasons or detail behind it, sorry.
So we expect an improvement of this, something's happening, because I'm more concerned about these residential people's homes than anything else. They're probably dealing with the most vulnerable in the community. So what do we know is going to happen? What should we be knowing this sort of stuff?
So what we tend to do is we publicise these results, we make them display the results, and we tell the people that need to know about what the results are, and we encourage them to work with us to improve the standards and apply for a rescore. And that's as much as we can do. If it falls below a 0, then we're looking at potential enforcement action, which we'll talk about in the next item of the report.
Falls below 0.
Yeah, you can get a 0, but actually if it's ungraded, then it's usually really desperate, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So my question's in the same subject as Councillor Kaufman. So you might have already answered it, but the care home issue is quite worrying. And when does it become an issue where safeguarding is involved? Is that kind of when it becomes below a 0, or or does it depend on what the issue is? If that makes sense, because obviously it will have an impact on vulnerable people.
Yeah, sure. Anything below a 3 is not acceptable. So they all get targeted for intervention. So we pester them about their scores. We say, you're not really fit to be serving food. There's not much we can do about it in that sense. But with care homes, what we do find is a lot to do with the managers and the change. There's quite a turnover of staff. And perhaps reducing numbers following the pandemic. They don't have as many people working as they did before. So a lot of it's about practices and paperwork, which is really disappointing considering the industry they're in, more than the actual risk of food poisoning to the residents. So although it's part of the evaluation, it's still scored quite highly in paperwork. The paper chase is going to be in place. So just to reassure you that, and I've been asking these questions, that how bad are they? Do we need to sort of invite all the care homes in here and give them a good lecture? But actually a lot of it is around the managers and the manager practice, and it varies so much from one to the other. But actually the overall food practices are reasonably satisfactory.
Thank you.
Bill Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit complicated, but there's people fall between the two stools. You've got the food inspection on one hand, CQC on the other hand, but nobody looks at the meals that people have been provided in care homes. Are they flourishing or not? The quality of the food that's being provided, nobody looks at that. So you can feed people on rubbish, and it meets all standards. The people at the bottom end suffer because not having nutritious meals. But CQC aren't interested in that, and environmentalists aren't interested in that. So they might meet all the standards, but the residents want to suffer. So something needs to be tightened up there by somebody to actually make sure the foods are wholesome and beneficial to the residents, and presented in a way that the residents can actually eat it. Because very often the food is presented in a way that the resident can't eat it. One instance, I noticed that a gentleman was partially sighted, but they put the food where he couldn't see it. Didn't eat it in 20 minutes, so they took it away and said he didn't want it. But he couldn't see it to eat it in the first place. But nobody's bothered about that.
That's right. Okay.
Sure.
No more questions to take it?
It's a good point that Councillor Bolt has raised, and it's something we've mentioned to the Quality Commission, because ultimately our desire is to make sure the food is nourishing as well as obviously acceptable from a hygiene perspective. And we've been pushing the CQC, which should be part of their assessment around not only the living conditions, but include that in that assessment. So we'll keep on them, and we'll let you know how we get on with that one. So wish us luck on that one.
Yep.
So the next slide is the overall scores. So as you can see there, they're the gradings. On the left, it's 31 to be expected, which they're programme for in the quarter. We're in now January, February, March. The pleasing thing is, you see, there's say that 90% over the generally satisfactory mark. And those 6 that we've got down there, they're the ones that we're currently targeting. Okay, quick overview of selective licensing, given it's business as usual. Getting a few more applications in, we've started to serve more notice through. So we've served 39, so failure to respond can lead to a £3,000 fine. You probably remember this conversation before. And we've pushed applications from another 20 as a result of it. So I've asked for those 19 that are outstanding to be pursued as a matter of some urgency. And you can see there now that there's licences issued, and obviously the key thing now is get them and then we start doing visits and inspections.
Alan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just out of interest, Mr. Weld, do we know how many rental properties we've actually got in the borough? I mean,
As a whole?
On a whole, whether they are a private rental or social housing, obviously council rental, we know about that. But do we have a figure for how many rental properties? It's a hot topic at the moment. Every time you turn the television on, the rental properties and the increase in rents escalating, and not enough rental properties around. And I just wondered whether we had any knowledge of how many we've got in the borough. Every time I look around now, properties that are going on the market, then very often, within a few months, come back up for let.
Sure.
And I would have thought our rental properties are going up considerably, but I've no idea, and I don't know whether any checks are kept. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we should have that data. I haven't got it to hand, but I'm happy to provide that for you. Certainly we knew in South Wales, for example, before we put the scheme together, roughly the number of properties there were, and we were within about sort of 5% of that, so it's reasonably accurate. But I can find out to let you know if that's okay, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Michael Chowdhury?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the 28 that are withdrawn, Is that because the properties are no longer in that status, or have they just withdrawn from the process?
It might be due to a change in tenure. So in other words, it was rented, it's now owner occupied.
Right,
I suspect that's the main reason.
but you don't know.
Not on the face of it, I can find that out and then let you know, that's not a problem. I've just been given the headline, so I do apologise. Yeah. Thank you. So the Green Homes Grant Programme, you probably heard referenced as the LAD 2, 3 and the HUG. So LAD 3 is a local authority delivery programme. This is all around green measures, shall I call, so solar, cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, external wall insulation, and so forth. And then the HUG is all around off-gas properties, trying to get maximum measures in there. You can see the overview of where we're at there. So real bit of interest. And I think the criteria is still the same, which is actually if household income is below £30,000 a year, you can apply for one of these grants if you fulfil the other criteria around being in the borough and so forth. So there's quite a bit of money in there to be spent. Before, if I may take a question in a minute, Councillor Carter. We've also supporting a housing decarbonisation fund. This is just before council housing. £500,000 for similar measures over the next 2 years. So we've put a programme together on behalf of our housing team, and the gentleman who looks after this is our grants officer, and we'll be running that scheme for them as well. So we can apply it to both our properties and the private rented sector as well.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at these three tables that are presented here, it appears that we've had an underspend on both of the LAD programmes. When I add the two underspends together, it comes to almost exactly the same figure as in the right-hand column. Is that effectively that we've been able to secure or retain the underspend and carry it forward? Is how I interpret those three tables?
Correct, and that's the desire with the programmes, that actually it's a real short timescale to deliver such big measures, especially external wall insulation, which sometimes requires planning permission. So we've asked, and we've been successful so far in managing carrying that funding forwards for further delivery.
Yes, and that's excellent news that we've therefore got a considerable amount of money invested in these green initiatives, both the ones on that page and the additional £500,000 that you mentioned.
Yes.
Decarbonisation, in fact, brilliant.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I was with Elton Overview School in Lincoln County last Wednesday, and this came up. I thought I was going to be on the back foot because we're not part of the county-wide consortium that's doing this sort of work. I'm grateful for the officers for providing me with lots of information, including this. So I didn't go to the meeting cold and unaware. It was clear from the figures the county had got that we seem to be ahead of the game, and especially as part of the South Midlands group that includes Birmingham, West Midlands, all the way to South Wales, and we seem to be a little more on the ball than they seem to be designing it from bottom up at county. Just my view on events, and I know Councillor Bolter tried to attend the meeting, but he was prevented from entering the meeting. Sorry, technology problems.
Kicked out or was? Kicked out?
Right, it is under LAD 2, we sort of, it was about £10,000 plus the project, but the LAD 3 project is much more expensive. Is that because we're being more ambitious on those projects, or are they more difficult ones?
I think the grateful for your feedback, and that was one of the key decisions I made when I first came. So how successful the scheme was at this local level. Why would we buy into a county consortium when we're already delivering it? And actually the money we're getting is far in excess of what the local authorities in Leicestershire are getting. So thank you for that feedback. In terms of LAD 3, we've included now external wall insulation, which wasn't originally under LAD 2. So if you think of the significance and the cost of that for a single measure, it's a lot proportionally higher than it would be previously. So that's the main reason for those increases.
Thank you.
Quick slide there on other activities in private sector housing. So as you're probably aware, we get ongoing cases. So particularly prompted by that mould case with that unfortunate youngster who died. I've asked them to pick up the houses and multiple occupation licensing regime. So hoping to bring a report to you in the next time. We're reviewing all of those and actually getting them to start paying a fee to license, so we get a bit of income from that. There's some work that started a few years ago, I'm aware of, on empty homes. One of the members of the team has that expertise from a previous job, so he's come forward and he's trying to help build our database around where we know there are empty homes and how we tackle those and get them into and reuse. And there's a mention of that decarbonisation programme I've just mentioned before. So, air quality, members had asked for 2 additional diffusion tubes to be put in place, which we're now getting the measurements back from. So, one on the Harbour Road Regent Street, I believe that's along the A6. It's 35, the actual objective level's 40. But these are bias corrected, so normally we apply a correction factor of about 0.7, so we reduce it slightly to give it an annual figure. And as you can see, for the one on the corner of Newton Lane and Welford Road, it's 26. So I just thought you'd be interested in that. And then in the coming months, we start to do the annual status report again, so I'll bring all that information back there. And then the Blakeney Road project with Public Health at Leicestershire, that will start in April with schools, the real main focus, but also looking at measuring particulates, because we've never actually measured particulates along that corridor. We just measure nitrogen oxides. Quick overview of licensing. So licenses processed for the full calendar year last year, gives you a flavour there of where the main key areas are in terms of taxis and carriages. And as you can see, we're still very high for the size of area in terms of how many we do. There is a service review that's ongoing. There's a new Licensing Act guidance note that's just been released. So that's on noise. So this protects existing noisy activities. So rather than a proposal coming planning-wise for some new houses next to a pub, they're now trying to form links between the two and protect existing noise sources. So, for example, a pub can be particularly noisy. So, therefore, if these houses move or are given consent, and the house developer has to then pay for the mitigation that's needed to make it acceptable, rather than the pub having to pick up the cost. So, it's called the agent of change principle. They're looking at changing all of that. Fees and charges, still working with finance to get all those out. There's a couple of investigations going on there, as you can see, so some animal welfare cases, working with immigration to licensed premises, and then a refusal of a driver's licence was upheld at Magistrates Court on public safety grounds. So some of the key headlines there for you. That's where I have gone.
Chair, you move them rather quickly. So, one at the top back, Blakeney Road project. That's the WEES programme, is it not? You're talking about? Yes, and it's still set to go ahead in April. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, to conclude, just the bits and pieces that don't fall into those categories. So we seem to be getting an increasing number of welfare burials, which is unfortunate. So we've had about 5 in the last couple of months. So quite a lot of work goes on there. Thankfully, 3 of them, we've managed to identify funds that will cover our costs. So at least the council's getting the money back on that. But it's quite sad that actually we can't identify any next of kin in these instances, so we have to take responsibility for that. Coming up with a more robust process around permits. So these are processes that prescribe control that have the potential to pollute the atmosphere. So to give you an example, it'd be things like smoulders, quarries, vapor recovery at petrol stations and petrol forecourts, laundrettes, dry cleaners, that type of thing. So we've got something in the region of mid-20s within our borough. So all of those need licensing. We provide that licence and we charge them for the privilege of that, and then we inspect that periodically to make sure they're complying with it. Recent news, managed to be successful, and we're in the process now of recruiting for an apprentice regulatory compliance officer. So this will be somebody that supports our technical side of the job, somebody who actually we will support to go to university. It's paid for with the apprenticeship levy, so we're not actually paying for it. And it's somebody who will go through a 15 month course at level 4 to actually be a future technical officer with the borough. So it's building that resilience for the future. We get increasing numbers of air source heat pumps in planning. So I've done some guidance on that based on best practice. We're doing the due diligence checks with animal care services for the dog warden service, which will start on the 1st of April. And then recently we've just joined the scrap campaign to promote key messages around fly tipping and littering within our borough as part of a Leicestershire project. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's some years now since we tried it, but we've got. All those carefully, it's been recorded. The dye and finish industry does cause a lot of problems with smell and perceived health problems from residents where the plume comes down on their properties. I've tried for many years to get an authorised process. Is there any news on that at all?
This is the one not far from here, I take it. The one not far from here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So two things. One is there has to be a minimum level tonnage, if you like, of material before it qualifies to be a permitted process. Second thing is, depending on that tonnage as to whether the local authority deals with it or the Environment Agency deal with it. So, and the gel-free card that these businesses have is if they recycle some of that material, they can claim that back against the product they're getting in the first place. So the last time I looked at it, when I was made aware of it, not long after I started, they just fell under that level. So we'll quite happily go back out there and ask the same questions as we did before, and we can demand that information from them to make sure, and the obligation is with them to tell us if it changes in terms of the tonnage, if you like, of material they're using that may be capable of polluting. So there's all these things to consider, but I'm happy to take another look at that.
The ideal solution is a stack analysis, but I know there's a cost to that. That will be the true way of finding out exactly what is going into the atmosphere.
And that can be required if he has a permit, for example. So the logical, you're quite right, the logical process, if he needs to be authorised, get him authorised, then we can insist on that stack test.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. How much does a welfare burial cost to the council is my first question. And also on Councillor Bolter's point, I often walk by or cycle by this particular works. And on a bad day, you can taste the stuff coming out of that chimney. I'd hate to live, I don't live very far away from it, but I'd hate to live next door to it and have that drifting over my house and garden all the time. When I raised it some years ago, I was told if it's white smoke, it's okay. If it's black, we're concerned. Which wasn't helpful.
No.
If you can taste the thing, there must be something not quite right there. I don't know whether they're operating at the moment. The place seems shut, which is a good thing. But if they do open up again, I'm not sure that chimney or the filters in it are fit for purpose. But the cost of a burial to us?
Yeah, so we, about £800. So we went out to 3 local providers in Leicestershire, and it was the co-op that came back and said, well, we'll cut it. We understand it's a no-nonsense type promotion.
Yeah.
So therefore we'll do it for this fee, whereas normally it would cost £1,200 to £1,500. So we negotiated a bit of discount on that side.
Well, it's something we've got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that as a duty, we have no choice. It was trying to get the best value we possibly could.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Due diligence checks, I'm not quite sure what this means. Is this the contract that we have to bring up to Oxford? What is this contract that's going to start today?
So we currently, we don't operate a dog warden service. We contract that service to Animal Care Services Limited. So that contract ends on the 31st of March 2023. So what we did back in October, November, if you recall, I mentioned at one of the previous committees, is we went out to see quotations for the service moving forward, because we couldn't extend that contract any further. And the company that were originally Animal Care Services, who now trade as Animal Care Services Midlands Limited, were successful. So we're just taking some checks around their finances, the company position, making sure they can get the contract terms and conditions complied with in advance of the start date. And I've got a meeting in their new facility with their managing director. I believe if it's not next week, it's the week after, to finalise a lot of that detail. And Humera here, sitting here, is working with me in terms of getting that issued and put through. So it's something that we do because it costs us a lot less than employing a dog warden.
And I assume it's the same terms. Because
Indeed.
we're particular in making sure that
Yes.
the anything like that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Helen Lloyd.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's two things. I'll deal with the first one because it's just for information only. Coming back to the dye works, it has been closed off and on for 4 or 5 months at a time. The gates were locked. There is actually a notice up on the railings at the moment, and I'm not quite sure, I've not walked by and read it, but there were 2 official people there with clipboards a little while ago, and these notices have gone up, so I don't know whether that's to do with what's happening, so that's just for information if you're going to check out. But coming back to these welfare burials, can I ask, this is very unfortunate, it's very sad that this is happening. Are the people from care homes, so that they have at some stage been looked after and then died in care home, or have they been found in their own homes? Because that raises a really serious issue, which probably is not this council's problem, but I would have thought was social services. I would not like to think that there were any people, and I presume they're elderly, and that is a presumption, that they are on their own and died, and there's nobody there that's taking care of them. So have we got that information? And do we act on it?
Yes, so they're probably mixed, to be fair. So some in their own homes, some have been in their own homes, have got too poorly and had to go into a care facility, and they're not lasted particularly long. And then, because the care facilities in our area, we have to pick up that responsibility. Age-wise, a reasonable assumption that they're sort of 60 onwards, not particularly elderly. Some are a bit older. I think the sad thing is that a lot of people in the communities, if they're living at home, perhaps didn't even know these people. They're sort of recluses, they live very quiet lives, didn't have a lot to do with them, didn't have a lot of help. And perhaps because they've not got family or many friends, then probably wouldn't know where to go. A lot of the people are people that are from similar backgrounds to ourselves here. So you would have thought that, you know, maybe language wasn't a barrier, maybe some of the other problems that we might think might exist. We did notice an increase during COVID for the reasons that are quite obvious. But I think it's quite sad that at least incoming waves, you know, wherever I've worked, welfare areas have always been the same areas working because you're looking through people's private information, trying to track people down. And we've been successful in probably about 20% of cases. Distant relative who didn't even know that person how they where they live. So there's obviously no links there, but they are still family. So.
Yes, Chair, it's quite worrying, Chair, if we've got an increase, fortunately, it's a small increase, but it's an increase of people that are in their own homes and nobody knows. That is a real concern. We shouldn't be having that in today's. If they've gone into a care home, at least there's somebody picking up on the fact. But when they're in their own homes and they're dying and there's nobody there, that is a worry. That does concern me. I'm hoping it concerns this council as well.
Michael Sargent.
Just on that point, it is sad when somebody dies alone, but there are a lot of people living alone at the moment for one reason or another, and a lot of them are just surviving on pension and welfare. They don't own the property, it's probably a council house or rented property, it's all paid for. They have very little savings, if any, no tangible assets, and no money to bury them with, and no relations to help out either. It is sad, but a lot of people are living lonely lives at the moment, and the pandemic's had a lot to do with that. I'm not sure how we tackle that, to be honest, Helen. I think groups and societies do their best, but there are people that just don't want to be in any sort of club or association. And it's just a fact of life. Sad one, but...
Is that it, Ms. Marks? Vote to go on the report?
No, that's the presentation. We've got the reports that after there's no questions.
Okay, let's hear it, Jeffries.
Yeah, well, the question I've got is relates to what talks you. So do we arrange burials or cremations, or how do we decide?
Cremation. It's a cremation.
Cheap.
Yeah.
Cheap blood.
Not attendance cremation. Exactly for the reasons you said.
Okay. Shiraz, next.
So the food safety enforcement policy, as you're aware, one of the primary functions of local government is to protect the public, environment and groups of workers. At the same time, carrying out enforcement functions in an equitable, practical and consistent manner to help promote a thriving local economy. In relation to food, the council must therefore have a food safety enforcement policy. This provides guidance to officers when making decisions about enforcement actions and the options available to them. It is also seen as good practice by the Food Standards Agency. So attached to this report is a new policy for approval tonight by this committee. It's been completely written to ensure it reflects both the Concord Act, which is about transparency, and the regulatory code, removing unnecessary burden on businesses. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
David Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a detailed environmental policy, which makes fairly clear reading up until section 10. An observation, when I read section 10, I look at the measures listed A to G, and it looks to me that A, B, C, D are sequential or increased hierarchy or whatever way you want to put it. And then we have three extras. Issue simple cautions, take a prohibition action, and then suspension or withdrawal of approvals. Now, first of all, is that a fair assessment of the 7 things set out there? Would it make easier reading if it read A, B, C, and then insert E, because the simple cautions comes before prosecution. Delete F, because taking prohibition action seems to be the same as issuing statutory notices. And then G comes on after prosecutions. Does that make logical sense? So that it reads sequentially in terms of a hierarchy of action.
I understand where you're coming from, and I think if I can explain for a moment, you're quite right. So this is on page 11, is it?
Page 11 of your report,
That's right.
29 of the waiting papers.
So clearly, first three reasonably straightforward. First four. Now, simple cautions can either arise as a result of a prosecution, or, as you quite rightly put, it may be prior to a statutory notice or after a statutory notice. What we've tried to do there is say, right, you've got those four causes of action, and then a simple caution could be the backfall from that if that's something that's considered. The prohibition is actually closing premises, so that's it, you're not allowed to operate. And then an approval is one of those that's actually where you approve a premises for overseas selling and registration and all that. So hopefully that clarifies that can fall out of the first four potential. And I do get your point though. Well made, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I did realise that G was the top level. Which then, and I think then in that sense, the rest of it makes sense, and is very good. The only other observation I would make again about readability is on page 17 of your report, where it talks about voluntary prohibition. The section that starts where a food business operator volunteers to close premises, that section then down to the heading 10.6. Would that make better readability if it came after 10.6? So you have three bits there. You have health risks, conditions, which ends with the use of a process.
Yeah.
Then you have the next section, which goes down to voluntary prohibition. Now, I read it, and it looked to me as though that would more logically follow on at the bottom of the page. Okay.
You're happy to reorder that, absolutely. The idea being that a food business, to protect their interests, have the option to voluntarily close and avoid formal action at that stage. Because if we were to close, then we'd have to go to court to confirm that closure. And clearly it becomes public knowledge then. So sometimes they do voluntary closure and say, close for kitchen refurbishment to protect what's going on, so they can put things right. So happy to, so that would be, Adam, just so you can make a note for, sorry. Yeah. Right, we'll reorder that for you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just. That's it, that's fine, thank you. That makes sense.
David, you absolutely amaze me. All these tiny people here. My comments are basically I'm lazy. And I was just wondering if it's possible, when you do something like that and amend something you've got, for lazy people like me, is it possible to show up the amendments? So the stuff, if any of it, I notice your comments been a complete rewrite, and I didn't know that to say that, but my question now would be, if you're changing something like that, I would somehow like to compare, be able to easily, easily to be able to compare it with what we're replacing. It's just a comment, if that's possible.
Yeah, just to confirm that Councillor Kaufman is lazy. No, and going back to Mr. David Carter's first point about page 11, it might have been better if we had one of these box charts with a flow down, seeing what actions, results, prosecution, and then results, depending on what force these events took. It might have been a little more understandable. Like we're having conduct hearings.
Suggest that the policy, we're happy to change that element of it, now I've explained it to Councillor Carter, is that the next meeting, I'm happy to bring a food officer along and they'll provide you with the chart to show you in reality how these things work. I think the policy is just a piece of paper that's got all these things written down to make it really clear to people. And then perhaps the flow chart and how we do things practically. It may be quite useful to have that in a future session if you're happy with that.
Thank you. Fine, thank you.
Okay, sorry, got some more. Fair.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. This isn't about the policy, so this is just going back to the burial cremation thing. I just want to ask you a question on that. It's more of an ethical question. So when you're sorting through somebody's belongings and you might find a will that's written and it says, I would like my body to be buried, ethically, what would happen in that? I'm not trying to catch anybody out, it's just a question that I'm quite interested to ask.
If there was a will, we take advice on it, but then we would have to follow the will's details more often than not. I don't think I've ever come across one in these cases, no. Yeah.
Okay, just a question, but that's reassuring.
Yeah, we'd have to fulfil, I believe, the obligation is written in a will if we found one, yes.
Thank you.
Lily Kaufman.
Thank you. I assume we're going to vote whether we accept this tonight. Is that correct? Yeah. I'm just being picky here. So if this is like the final thing, on page 22, probably on page 4, I think you're using the wrong complementary. I think it should be the LEMENTARY. Using the complement to compliment somebody. But if it's a complementary thing, to be something to be added to it.
Could you give me a bit more clarity as to where it is, please?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
The last paragraph on your page 4.
So it's last paragraph.
Second line.
One introduction, which is page 4. And it's the second line down.
Yeah. Or are complementary to. I think you've used that. Yeah. And also on your page 17, 10.6, going for prohibition, should a voluntary offer to close you've got a premises.
Right.
Yeah. That's fine. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaufman. Okay, Mr.
There's two, page 25.
Sorry to be finicky, as with council.
You catching up with Jeffrey Kaufman?
Oh, no, this is
Mrs. Kaufman now.
Mrs. Kaufman, not. We go, it may be just my version, but on page 17, it then goes to page 25. And then there's another 25.
And then there's another one.
So where are the 8 pages? Where's the 8 pages in between? What am I being told? What am I not being told, Chair?
They're all 25.
All 25 after.
Yeah.
Which is your pagination issue, John.
It's just probably the way, I think the original policy's got all page numbers on it. And because it's gone into the report, something's gone a bit pear-shaped with that, but it just runs quite sequential on there, I can assure you. So do we page number it correctly?
The final document will look a little, yes.
Okay, as well.
That's why there's vice chairman here. The chairman of the finance. Go on now.
We need a mover and a seconder.
Let's all go.
Need a mover and a seconder.
I'm happy to move all the amendments that members have put forward.
Oh, sorry. Is that the end of the report, Ms. Wells?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, it's been moved with the amendments and 3 people.
Pick one.
Pick one.
Mr. Carter, let's have next team, sorry. Okay, all those in favour? Means nobody against. Thank you.
Go on now, come on.
That's it.
Is that the end of the agenda now? Last. Thank you.
That bad.
Thank you for your attendance and good night.
Thank you.
Safe driving.
Safe driving.